Do you know the greatest battle you will ever face is not with anyone else? It is with yourself. Every man, every woman has a version of themselves that is weak, insecure, and hesitant. That weak version is comfortable, it is safe, it does not want to grow, it clings to excuses, and it loves to whisper lies in your ear. You are not ready, you cannot, you should not try. But I am here to tell you today, that version of you does not define your destiny. You cannot wait for life to change you. You must force yourself to outgrow the weak version of you. And when I say force, I mean it not gently, not occasionally, but intentionally, deliberately, and persistently. Because growth does not come to those who are comfortable. Growth comes to those who are willing to disrupt their own weakness and demand more from themselves than the world demands. Listen carefully. The weak version of you loves excuses. It loves to blame circumstances. It loves to settle for mediocrity. And it loves to delay your dreams. But every time you make an excuse, every time you give in to fear, you are feeding that weak version. And that weak version will stay alive inside you until you starve it out. You must make a decision today. Will you feed your weakness or will you feed your strength? Will you stay who you are or will you become who you are meant to be? The truth is this: the person you were yesterday cannot compete with the person you are capable of becoming tomorrow. That is why forcing yourself to outgrow the weak version of you is not optional, it is a necessity. You cannot outgrow what you do not recognize. The weak version of yourself is not a stranger, it is living inside you every day, whispering subtle lies, convincing you that your limitations define you and that your potential is fixed. This version of you is clever. It knows how to disguise itself as comfort, familiarity, and even practicality. It tells you to wait, to settle, to not push, and to accept life as it is, rather than life as it could be. And here is the critical truth. The weak version of you will never go away on its own. It does not retire. It does not take vacations. It is persistent because it has a vested interest in keeping you small, safe, and unchallenged. If you are honest, you have felt its presence. It is the voice that stops you from taking risks, that convinces you to compromise your dreams, that makes excuses when opportunities appear. It shows up when you hesitate to speak your truth, when you allow fear to guide your decisions, when you choose comfort over courage. That weak version is the barrier between you and your destiny. And the moment you begin to see it clearly, the moment you shine the light of awareness on its tactics, you gain power over it. Awareness is not passive. It is the first act of resistance against mediocrity. It is the awakening that tells you, I am more than my fears. I am more than my excuses. I am more than the version of me that is content to remain small. Recognizing this weak version also means recognizing the patterns it creates in your life. Every time you procrastinate, every time you allow fear to dictate your choice, every time you settle for less than you deserve, you are feeding it. And the more you feed it, the stronger it becomes. But here is a hook I want you to remember. The weak version of you only has power because you give it power. It is dependent on your attention, your consent, and your belief in its authority. The moment you stop believing in its narrative, the moment you refuse to obey its commands, that weak version begins to shrink. And it is not about eliminating fear or weakness entirely. That is impossible, but about refusing to let it control your actions. This is why recognition is so vital. You must study your weakness like a scientist studies a phenomenon. Observe its influence, track its impact, and understand when it manipulates your choices. That weak version thrives on ignorance, on distraction, on the illusion that you are powerless. But knowledge of self is a weapon. The moment you name the weak patterns, the moment you identify the excuses, the moment you see clearly the ways in which you have limited yourself, you begin to reclaim your authority over your life. You become the commander of your destiny rather than the prisoner of your past. And here is the most compelling truth. The weak version of you is not permanent, and it is not your enemy. It is a signal, a guidepost. Every time it appears, it is showing you where you need to grow, where courage must replace comfort, where action must replace hesitation. Those moments are opportunities disguised as obstacles. The weak version is like a mirror reflecting the areas where transformation is required, and the sooner you confront it, the faster you outgrow it. The first step toward becoming your strongest self is not about changing the world. It is about seeing yourself fully, honestly, and refusing to let fear, excuses, or past failures define your future. Taking full responsibility for your growth is the moment you step out of being a victim of circumstance and into the role of a master of your own destiny. Too many people wander through life blaming the world, blaming others, blaming situations, and even blaming God for their shortcomings. They wait for opportunities to appear, for people to guide them, for circumstances to align perfectly, and in the meantime, the weak version of themselves grows stronger, feeding off their inaction. The harsh truth is this: nobody can grow for you, nobody can fight your battles for you, and nobody can push you beyond your limits but you. Every step toward your greatness begins with taking responsibility for the person you are becoming, not the person you were yesterday. Responsibility is not a burden, it is power. It is the ability to influence, direct, and shape your life according to the vision within you. When you claim responsibility for your growth, you stop giving energy to excuses and start giving energy to solutions. The moment you say, "I am responsible for my life," you disarm the weak version of you that thrives on blaming circumstances, people, and past mistakes. That weak voice says, "I wasn't given a fair chance," or "I am unlucky." But when you embrace responsibility, those words lose their power because you now understand that growth is not about fairness. It is about your willingness to act, to learn, and to persist despite what life hands you. Here is a hook for you: growth never waits for permission. It does not knock politely on your door. It comes when you decide to stop depending on luck, on others, or on perfect timing. Every great person, every leader, every visionary recognized that their life's outcomes were determined not by circumstance, but by conscious choice and disciplined action. Responsibility forces you to confront your weaknesses, to examine your habits, to study your failures, and to make the deliberate decision to do differently, to do better, and to do consistently. The weak version wants excuses, the strong version wants solutions. You cannot allow both to coexist because they are in direct conflict. One must dominate, and the choice is yours. Taking responsibility also means accepting that failure is not final, it is feedback. The weak version fears mistakes because it wants to remain comfortable. But when you embrace responsibility, you see failure as a teacher, a mirror showing you where adjustments are needed. Every misstep becomes an opportunity to learn, to pivot, and to grow stronger. That is the difference between someone who outgrows weakness and someone who remains trapped in mediocrity. The willingness to own every part of their journey and use it as fuel for transformation. Listen carefully. The people who achieve extraordinary success are not necessarily the most talented. They are the ones who refuse to make excuses, who refuse to hand over responsibility to anyone else, who consistently take ownership of their thoughts, their actions, and their growth. Responsibility is not passive, it is intentional. It demands courage because it forces you to look in the mirror and admit, "I am accountable for what I do and who I am becoming." And here is the real hook: when you claim this power, when you refuse to blame, when you accept responsibility fully, you do not just outgrow the weak version of yourself, you redefine what is possible for your life, and you begin to operate in a space of freedom, strength, and unstoppable potential. Stepping out of your comfort zone is not optional if you want to outgrow the weak version of yourself. Comfort is the silent assassin of potential. It whispers to you every day, telling you to settle, to wait, to play it safe, and to accept less than you are capable of. But growth does not reside in comfort. It lives on the other side of risk, challenge, and uncertainty. Every great leader, every pioneer, every person who changed the world had to move beyond comfort and deliberately enter the space where fear and possibility meet. And here is a hook you must grasp. The weak version of you will resist. It will fight every attempt to push beyond what is familiar because comfort has been its home, its shield, and its excuse for inaction. Discomfort is the currency of transformation. The weak version of you fears it, avoids it, and warns you against it. But when you embrace discomfort, you are signaling to yourself that your growth matters more than your ease. Every time you take a step that feels risky, every time you do what your weak self resists, you are rewiring your identity. You are telling yourself, I am not defined by fear. I am defined by courage. I am not limited by hesitation. I am empowered by action. That is the essence of forcing yourself to outgrow weakness, the willingness to consistently do what the weak version does not want to do. Here is another truth. The weak version thrives on excuses, but courage thrives on action. Action requires pushing through doubt, ignoring the voice that says, not now, or I'm not ready, and moving forward anyway. Every great accomplishment begins as a decision to act, even when conditions are imperfect. The weak self wants perfect timing, ideal circumstances, or the approval of others. The strong self knows that waiting for the perfect moment is a trap, and that greatness is forged by starting now, learning as you go, and persisting despite obstacles. Listen carefully. The person who steps into discomfort consistently becomes stronger, sharper, and more capable. They do not just face challenges, they grow because of them. Another hook: discomfort reveals who you truly are. When life tests you, when circumstances push you, and when the weak version screams to retreat, you discover your strength, resilience, and hidden potential. Every challenge you face is not a punishment. It is an opportunity. The weak self shrinks in the presence of difficulty. The strong self expands. And the more you practice stepping into what scares you, the more the weak version loses its influence, because it cannot survive in an environment where courage, determination, and persistence are dominant. And let me emphasize this: stepping out of comfort is not about reckless risk. It is about calculated courage. It is about moving into growth, learning from each step, and refusing to allow fear or laziness to dictate your decisions. Surround yourself with people, experiences, and environments that stretch you, not those that soothe you. Challenge yourself daily, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, so that the weak version of you has no room to hide. And here is the ultimate hook: the discomfort you avoid today is the weakness you will endure tomorrow. The discomfort you embrace today is the strength you will own for the rest of your life. Transformation is not a single event. It is the product of consistent, intentional effort. The weak version of you thrives on inconsistency. It wants you to start and stop, to give up after a few attempts, to believe that occasional effort is enough. But growth, true growth, is the result of repetition, discipline, and persistence. Habits are the building blocks of character, and character is the foundation of greatness. Every day you act in alignment with your vision, you are feeding the strong version of yourself. Every day you fail to act, you are feeding weakness. And here is a hook to grasp tightly. What you do consistently today determines the level of your strength tomorrow. Your future self is not built by chance. It is built by your choices, by your habits, and by your willingness to do what the weak version refuses to do. Consistency is not glamorous. It does not come with applause or immediate reward. It is quiet, disciplined, and often unseen, but it compounds over time, creating unstoppable momentum. The weak version fears discipline because discipline requires control over impulses, mastery over emotions, and commitment beyond comfort. The strong version embraces discipline because it understands that every small action repeated daily creates extraordinary results. The key is not to wait for motivation. It is to create habits that carry you even when motivation is absent. Motivation is fleeting, habit is permanent. The weak self relies on fleeting feelings. The strong self relies on consistent action. Another hook to ignite your mind: the environment you place yourself in either strengthens you or weakens you. Surround yourself with people, books, experiences, and routines that stretch you, that challenge you, that inspire excellence. Weakness grows in the company of comfort, mediocrity, and excuses. Strength flourishes in the presence of challenge, accountability, and purpose-driven action. Every decision you make about what you allow into your life either feeds the weak version or the strong version. That is why the choices you make daily are more powerful than any external circumstance. Persistence is the engine that drives growth. The weak version wants immediate results. It fears delay and discomfort. But true mastery, true transformation is rarely instant. It is forged over time, through repeated effort, through learning from failure, and through the unwavering refusal to give up. Every setback, every obstacle, every criticism is a chance to strengthen the strong version and weaken the hold of the weak one. The weak self looks for shortcuts, but the strong self understands that shortcuts bypass the very process that builds power, resilience, and character. Here is the final hook. Consistency creates identity. What you do repeatedly does not just produce results, it shapes who you are. The weak version may claim, "I am weak," but the strong version declares, "I am disciplined. I am capable. I am relentless." Every choice, every habit, every action reinforces this identity. Over time, the weak version fades because it can no longer compete with the reality of the person you have intentionally become. Growth is not accidental, it is deliberate. The weak self resists, the strong self perseveres. And in that daily, persistent action, you are not just outgrowing weakness. You are claiming your destiny, step by step, habit by habit, moment by moment.